So we're back then with another build guide video for Marvel's Avengers. It's been quite some time since I last had the chance to do a build guide video on a new hero, so this is pretty exciting. For this one here, it is of course Black Panther. The build in question that we will be showing off, because he is a melee hero, it's a build that's got a ton of damage but a ton of survivability as well. I think it's very important if you're doing a build guide for a melee character, you don't go glass cannon. It can work on range characters, it's not going to work on a melee character at all, but thankfully, as mentioned, with the setup I've been able to find today, we've got an absolute heap of survivability and damage. Now let's jump in and let's break this down in a bit more detail. So with this setup then, as mentioned, it's all about survivability and damage. So we get this through maintaining high uptime and two buffs that are available within this kit. You've got Percussive Blast, you can actually activate that when your intrinsic meter's full, and then you've got Bast's Chosen, that comes from your heroic ultimate ability. Using the two of these together provides us with an additional 10% crit rate, 70% flat damage, 10% crit damage, 55% damage reduction, and when your ultimate heroic buff is available, we can block any attack on demand. That's your red attacks as well. It won't work unfortunately on your dots like your Gamma Cloud and so on, but if you're going up against, let's just say, an Adaptoid and he fires off a red attack, you can block that, and we're aiming to get 100% uptime on this block ability as well. So yeah, insane amount of survivability. In regards to the damage, we make use of the battery effect and the pounce move to have a huge amount of burst damage as well there. So that is a quick overview of the build. Let's jump in now and talk about the stats that you want to aim for. Stat-wise then, with the build, I most certainly have a lot of room for improvement. I've been exceptionally unlucky when it comes to getting useful stats on the gear I was wanting to show off for this build. The build has the perks, but the stats have definitely been a pain for me, but it's something I'll keep working on. And of course, when you actually try and follow this build, you can work on that as well. But the primary stat you want is a melee build, so you're going to go for might first. We then have proficiency, you want to stack that as well. I'm pretty low, I'm only down at 60, but that gives me 20% crit chance. If you factor in the 5% from the champion system, the damage buff, and then also the 10% you would get via Percussive Blast, when you spec into that, that's you up to 70% crit rate, and again you're trying to get your 100% uptime on this, so potentially 70% crit all the time. You've then got your Valor, which is nice to have if you've got high crits. Valor doesn't affect the buff effect on his ultimate. I was hoping it would, but I went in and I tested it and it actually doesn't. So Valor's nice, but don't go too heavy in it. Resolve, I'm massively lacking in this, but I do have that 55% damage reduction. Of course I do want to get my Resolve up. Probably want to get it round to about 15,000 or so, and then I'll be happy with that. But that is the stats. Let's now talk about the gear perks. So the gear I have at the moment then, there is most certainly a lot of room for improvement, but the idea with these build guide videos isn't that I've spent 500 hours farming, I have god roll items that you have no chance in hell of actually getting yourself, and I'm showing them off. The idea behind these is I'm really showing you a direction you can go in with your build, and then you can go away and farm and you can get the same results, or you can get even better results than me, ideally. So the first one we look at, your slot 1 here, you can now actually get your melee crit attacks grant a damage buff. This only drops from the Wakanda region, so if you want your damage buff on your slot 1, you must farm in Wakanda at the moment. For your perk number 2 here, you want power attacks, the reason being your pounce is a power attack, and all subsequent hits you actually do your claws or power attacks as well. So you want a status effect on power attacks. The ideal one to go for is Sonic, but it's a cold status effect you're looking for. Sonic is fantastic because when you apply it, it will increase the heroic recharge rate when you're near the enemy you've applied it on. The third perk at the bottom here, what you would look for in a perfect world would be increased crit hit chance or increased damage for power attacks, because once again your pounce is a power attack. Looking at the slot 2 here, I've got a chance weak point attacks grant a heroic charge burst for all heroics. I would say this is where you want your heroic charge burst. You want it on your daggers. Ideally you would have it on just regular crits so you can proc it more often. For your perk number 2, you want to look for, it can be any one of the daggers to be honest, the devastating one is the easiest one to proc it, but you're looking for a warm status effect. When you're fighting a larger enemy, what you actually do is you'll throw out your daggers, you apply the debuff from them, you apply the warm status effect, and then you pounce and you've got the cold status effect, which means you're getting your battery damage and you're doubling your damage there. For the slot number 3, I have an exotic here. This drops from the priority missions, so you get one of these a week. Don't worry too much about this one here if perhaps you're having trouble farming it, or if you think, oh no, it's another one of these items like Operative's Armour that I need to get. You don't need this for the build, but it's working nice for me. If you don't have this, then just go for a piece that has reactive, where you can either get your damage buff or you can get intrinsic burst. You don't have a reactive gear piece that can give you heroic recharge rate, otherwise I would go for that. But this one here, just to run over it quickly, you gain recovery beads for a brief duration after defeating enemies with intrinsic attacks or when perfectly evading an incoming attack. So this procs really pretty often and it'll heal you back up. The beads don't benefit from the actual traits within your tree to the recovery beads. I tested that straight away. Bit of a pity, but if it did, it would probably be a bit too powerful to be honest. Next up, we've got Panther's Effector. So 20% increase in stun, status and all normal damage of intrinsic attacks. When you have the buff from your ultimate, your attacks will automatically be intrinsic attacks. So thinking back to the beginning of the video when we talked about the 70% increased damage on your intrinsic attacks, that will actually be 90% increased damage. Looking at the final perk here, defeating enemies while Percussive Blast is active will extend the duration of the ability by 2.5 seconds, just give you higher uptime on the buff from that. We then have this here, it's your elite bosses that will actually drop this. This is incredible for this build. So 20% increased damage and defense while Bast's Chosen is active. Increase the duration of Bast Chosen by a whopping 8.5 seconds, taking it up to 38.5 seconds. The final perk here, this is decent, this one, but in an ideal world I would go for defeat 3 enemies to get your heroic charge rate. That would be the perfect piece for me. I'm going to continue farming until I do actually get that. Looking at the artifacts now, you want triple might on your artifacts because it is a melee build. In regards to the perks you're looking for ones that increase the crit chance or damage of your power attacks, which will increase your pounce. Or you can also look for the increased heroic charge rate for your ultimate heroic, because you really do want to get that up as soon as you actually can. You want to get it up ideally within your 38 seconds so you can cast it straight away again and none of your buffs are actually dropping off. We have the ring as the major artifact there, that's the final one. If you're running a build where it's important you have high uptime on your heroics, then the ring is really a no-brainer. Now next up, let's have a look at the abilities. With this abilities section, I'll very quickly show 2 moves that we've referenced already. So you've got Pounce, this is your power attack as mentioned, you can do a huge amount of damage with this. You want this upgrade as soon as you can get it as well. It allows you to jump on top of your exos. Doesn't work on bosses, but when you do your pounce on a boss and you bounce off them, you can still do a huge amount of damage. With the pretty lackluster stats I've got at the moment, I'm breaking 100,000 battery damage with it, so you could go way higher than that with the right setup. Also very quickly show you Percussive Blast. So when your intrinsic meter is actually full and you've got a little purple glow over it, then you double tap this, you'll knock back enemies, you'll do an additional 10% damage as part of this. However, through perks we can get an additional 10% crit rate and 10% crit damage. It says it lasts for 10 seconds, but it actually lasts for 20 seconds. So let's now check out the speciality tree. For these next 2 pages then, I'll just really focus on the interesting nodes. I won't cover every single one of them. So this one here is absolutely great because this is great at stunning enemies. So if I've cast my ultimate ability and I need to get it back up as soon as possible, you want to ideally be doing some takedowns as well, and this allows you to get takedowns really pretty easy. So save this, don't use it as a damage move, use it as a utility move that can help you actually get takedowns and regenerate your heroics. On this one as well, we've got the extra 10-second duration. The longer the round, the more chance I'll actually have of stunning enemies and giving you the chance for a takedown. Now looking at this one here, I actually go for the free spears. I'm not using this for damage, I'm using it for utility. So I go for the free spears. I also go for this one here. Throwing the spear while the intrinsic meter is full will increase its damage by 15% and instantly trigger the Vibranium status effect on all targets it hits. Vibranium status effect is a warm status effect, so you can use that or you can use the warm status effect on your daggers to apply it to an enemy before you go in with your cold status effect on your power attacks, which is your pounds. We also have this here: every enemy hit by the spear grants 10% intrinsic meter. That can be nice if you need to get your intrinsic meter up to actually cast your percussive blast again. I don't use this one here because I'm not really spec'd into Valor at all, so I'm not getting many kills with the spears, and a 10% chance is really pretty too low as well. If it was a 100% chance I would go for it, but not a 10% chance. Now, looking at the ultimate heroic ability here, so you can see when you activate this, it reduces damage by 20%, increases damage dealt by 10%. We also have with this, and this is incredible, we talked about the huge damage reduction we have. This is essentially what Captain America has in his kit that I've done a video on recently, where you can block all attacks. It won't stop dots and like gamma clouds and so on, but your red attacks, as you can see here, it will block them. We've got this for 38 seconds, where you just hold down your right trigger and you'll block everything. It's unbelievable, this. Now, next we have Divine Empowerment. This one increases the duration of Bash Chosen by 10 seconds. That allows us to get up to that 38% on it. We then have Panther's Roar. Triggering the ultimate heroic will apply the Mark of Bass debuff on all enemies, increasing their damage taken from all sources by 10% and reducing the damage of all their attacks by 15% as well. That was worked into the damage numbers that I gave at the start of the video there. That was a 70% increased damage and 55% damage reduction. We then have this one here: History is Shared. Triggering the ultimate heroic will grant all nearby heroes a burst of energy that will fill their intrinsic meters up. Once again, I use this so that I'll cast my ultimate heroic, I get the buff from it, I then get full intrinsic energy, and then I can cast this to get the percussive blast, and I get the buff that comes alongside that as well. So that's the speciality. Let's look at the mastery tree now. So with the nodes here, as much as I mentioned I wouldn't go over all of them, almost all the nodes bar the first one are actually relevant to the build, but we'll try and go through them quick. So this one here increases the damage of all pounce attacks by 10%. We've then got Performing a Takedown generates a heroic orb. Next up, because I have a buff to kinetic daggers, I'm using this one here. So we've got kinetic dagger that gives you an explosion, actually knocks back the enemy. It's actually really nice. I think it's quite underrated in regards to the daggers you can throw. I also have increased stun damage from kinetic daggers. This is great because if I stun an enemy, I can do a takedown, get a heroic orb, and get my ultimate heroic backup available, hopefully within that 38 seconds. We then have increased the stun damage of all ranged weak point attacks by 10%. This one here: build up a small amount of intrinsic energy in each successful melee attack. This can be useful if you're someone that doesn't block often. I actually don't block often myself much. I like to dodge rather than block, so this can help build up your intrinsic. We've then got increase the damage of all intrinsic attacks, because when you use your ultimate heroic, it will make all your attacks intrinsic attacks, so it will switch them over to the intrinsic variant. And then we've got increase the damage dealt by all heavy intrinsic attacks there. Next up, we have increase the stun damage of the kinetic burst by 20%. We're not using the kinetic burst too much. We're using it for the buff, we're not using it for the damage that comes from it. The buff is so much more useful, but if we can get some extra stun damage on it and potentially another takedown, then I'll take that. Then we've got Cool Vibrations. Increase the crit attack chance by 10% and critical attack damage buff by 10% during the overcharge buff. That's the one that comes from your percussive blast. And then finally here we've got defeat an enemy while the overcharge buff is active as a 10% chance to drop a heroic orb. You also have this here, 20% chance for an intrinsic, so either of them could be good, but personally I prefer the heroic one. It's a low chance, but you should have high uptime on your overcharge buff to actually get that. So that is all the masteries. Let's now talk about the champion system and where you want to invest your points there. With the champion system, then your end game goal, of course, if you're maining a character, is to actually max it out. But what you don't want to do in the short term, because it takes longer to get champion points the deeper you get into the system, you don't want to pick the wrong nodes to start off with, and then you're really slowing down your progress. So I've highlighted the ones that I would recommend on Black Panther. The one that I would strongly recommend probably the most would be the heroic charge rate. That's so you can get the higher uptime on your buff. And then you've also got your crit chance. That's a flat crit chance, which is fantastic. I would go to the bottom of both of these trees. From there I would go down to about the 4th option on your crit damage. That scales really nice. It scales a lot better than the combat boosts under the first tree there, next to useless the way they actually work. And then you've got your perk chance, it could be nice as well. So that's just where to actually start off with the build, and again, as mentioned, you'll eventually fill everything out, but make a beeline for these nodes first. Now let's actually just finish up the video then with some gameplay. We'll show off a boss fight and we'll show off some of this survivability that I was talking about as well. Now if the video has been helpful, do take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button, and enjoy this gameplay. Thanks for tuning in, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.
Pathetic! This is all they have for them. Pathetic! This is all they have for that Father, guide me! Do not kneel!
The Abomination clone is defeated. Well done, Avengers.